Okay, day 10, which is a big milestone actually. When we hit this, we'll hit the 1,000 press-ups mark, which is huge. So let's see if we get there. Okay, that's 30. So, reflections at day 10. Third of the way there. I've definitely started to enjoy the process a lot more. Thinking back to how I felt before I started day 1, there was a lot more anxiety, nervousness, not so much about the recording, although that was one component that I'm now feeling a bit more comfortable with, but around the uncertainty of will I be able to do it? Well, how hard is 100 press-ups? And now that I'm at day 10, you know, I actually don't really even think about the press-up component anymore. I'm fairly comfortable that if I don't pick up an injury, if I don't fall ill, physically I'll be able to get to day 30, which is a great feeling. And definitely something that I have developed over the last 10 days. Thinking about, you know, whether is that the reason why I am enjoying this more, I'm not sure. And so I sat and thought about it, and I started wondering, is part of it because of this sort of relationship I have with competition? And I know that for probably my whole life, I've probably had quite an unhealthy relationship with competition, and it's something that I've been more aware of in the last few years and tried to manage. So sort of since childhood, I think competition was just drilled into everything, you know, as the reason why you do things. You know, at school every week, and I'm talking primary school, so from the age of sort of 5 or 6, it was spelling tests, maths tests on a weekly basis, and everyone was graded, scored relative to each other. Everything was calculated as where you rank in terms of each other, and to the point where I think probably up until 18, until secondary school, I used to feel my whole identity was wrapped up in my score and performance. And you know, it's easy for that to sound like a really toxic, negative thing, but I also appreciate that every success I've had in my life, and you know, everything that's gone well, is also a result of that. So it's a sort of love-hate relationship with competition, because in some ways it pushes you to do better, but in other ways it really messes with your mind, especially when, you know, you're doing something that you don't feel like you have the capacity to win at. And I think that's been a real issue. That's been the bit of an issue that I've tried to work on for the last few years, because especially when it comes to things like sport, that isn't something which was ever sort of drilled into me from my childhood, and I'm just less good at. Okay, it's another 30 to 60. So I think my own sort of ways to process things which I did where I wasn't as good. So let's say sort of academic and work achievements was always something that from a young age was a sort of environment that I was trained at and was always rewarded for, and so it was a world where I felt comfortable to compete in. And I don't know how much of it I used to do for the enjoyment and how much for the reward, but yeah, that was an environment I enjoyed, I did compete in, and so felt comfortable in. And I'll come back to the enjoyment reward thing in a second. Sports, less so, and I think maybe because of the environment I grew up in, it wasn't rewarded in the same way. And so when I was a kid, probably up until the age of sort of maybe even 13, 14, I used to swim quite a lot, but it never felt, and I think I was quite good at it. I remember doing well in galas and things, but it was never something that was ever rewarded in the same way, and I never enjoyed it. It was always such a chore. And I don't know how much of it was participation for the sake of being a rounded person just to tick that CV box. Same with playing music. I used to play the guitar and piano, and again, I never felt in those things I would ever be great at it, and I never found much enjoyment in them. But again, you do them because that's the world you grew up in, where you play an instrument alongside everything else. And I don't know, maybe I've gone a bit off tangent here, but I think the idea of competition driving sort of negative relationships and mindsets and enjoyment from things based on how well you think you're going to do is something that I realise now, that a lot of the things I did, which I did not enjoy because I didn't think I'd be able to win them. And so that's why they often fell to the side. And in the last few years I've tried, well, firstly, I think I've tried to become more aware of this and my sort of potentially toxic relationship with competition in some aspects and what I can do about it. And I think I've tried to, I don't think it's worth throwing the baby out with the bathwater and just stopping that completely, because I think there is some joy that I get, especially competing in team games or team activities, you know, pub quizzes, any sort of hobby team sports, things like that. I do really enjoy that type of competition, where it's competition in the correct environment and competition for the sake of fun, where everyone is aware and there's no real consequence to it. I do really enjoy that. But I think I used to get this sensation where even there were things that I wasn't competing in. So let's say, you know, football or watching rugby or even watching the marathon, let's say, you would watch them and I would think, oh, I wish I could do that and compete and win that, because it looks like a great feeling. And so you'd want to do the activity for the sake of winning it rather than for the joy of it, if that makes sense. And so trying to reduce, or at least catch yourself thinking like that. And the way that I've done it is, if you are taking something on, like competing at work or one sport, you have to realize that you are actively choosing not to win at 10 others, because you can't put in the same amount of effort into everything to a high standard. And so if you're choosing one or two things to put a high standard in, you're accepting that I can still do these 8, 9 other things, but I'm not going to win at that, and that's okay, because I am not dependent on that to enjoy it. So I guess it's separating the enjoyment from the competitive winning aspect, from the reward, is super important. minus 20, so up to 80. Anyway, I'm saying all this like I've done it. It's definitely not, I'm not at a place where I can say that I don't feel that sense of jealousy when someone else is competing and doing well. It's definitely something I'm working on, and I think I'm getting better at, but I think the first step for me is to sort of acknowledge it. And so I guess this is a more public acknowledgement of the fact that competition can take you down some really good roads, especially in the professional environment. I think there is a component of competition that you need, or else you're just going to get eaten alive and get taken advantage of. And then I think there's an element of fun that comes with competition in the arena, right? During the game, it's fun to be competing and playing to win in a sport or a tournament. But being able to switch that off, or being able to find joy even when you don't win, that's something that I need to work on, and something I'm getting better at. And I think that will bring a lot more just peace and happiness into the process of activity, sports, work, if you are going to enjoy it regardless of the outcome. Again, really idealistic mindset, but I think it's something you've got to try and build. And in some ways, I'm 35 and I've gone a large chunk of my life being the way I am, but in other ways you can view it as I've got a, touch wood, a long life ahead. And so being able to make these changes in how I view things that I do, I think is really important to be able to get more joy and satisfaction from the rest of my life. Like things like this competition, I guess I've got to think, let's say I don't hit the 30 days, let's say I pick up an injury, how would I feel about that? And I think I'd probably be okay about it, actually. I'd probably appreciate the process. I'd probably still do the recordings, and I'd probably come back and complete the 30 days at a later time. But that's what I hope I'd feel. Hopefully we'll never have to find that out, and we'll get to day 30, no issue. Okay, thanks for listening to that. See you all tomorrow.